let me then proceed with my introduction of Ceronne. And this is just going to be a short introduction because we do have Ceronne's full profile in the agenda along with the profiles of all of our panelists so that you can go and read the full thing because Ceronne has quite an extensive bio and so I just wanted to give the highlights. Ceronne is a corporate governance consultant from here in Trinidad and Tobago with over 15 years of experience working with boards and senior management in both the public and private sectors. She is the founder and lead corporate governance consultant of Ceronne Bayley's Consulting Services, a firm specializing in corporate governance guidance, training, and board support services for companies and new business owners. Ceronne's extensive involvement in philanthropic work includes serving as a board director and secretary of the Princess Elizabeth Center, being a member of the Association of Female Executives of Trinidad and Tobago, AFET, the Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society, and founder and director of Hydro Heroes Foundation. And along with all those responsibilities, she's also not just a member of CCGI, but also serves as our corporate secretary here for CCGI. Ceronne, I'm happy to hand over this panel to you now, so you could introduce your panelists and take over this discussion.
Thank you so much, Kamala. And we do have some amazing panelists here this evening. It's going to be exciting. So our first panelist, Robbie Rambaran, who is a CCGI director and has over 20 years of experience in the public and private sectors. Robbie is passionate about corporate governance and wants to see an improvement in how organizations are led and managed by the board and top management team. So just like Kamala said, you can read the rest of Robbie's professional profile in our agenda, and it is quite extensive. We also have Mr. Afra Raymond, who we are expecting shortly. Afra is a professional fellow of the RICS and the managing director of Raymond & Peer Limited. He also contributes to the press and broadcast media in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. His special interests include real estate, property development, land use planning, property taxation, property financing, and the 2009 bailout of the CL Financial Group. Joining us here as well is Mr. David Small. David Small epitomizes leadership excellence and strategic acumen with over 25 years of distinguished experience in business, strategic development, and team leadership. He's a visionary with a keen ability to foster relationships across diverse sectors. David has consistently delivered exceptional results while upholding the highest standards of ethical conduct. And I welcome Robbie and David to this, our panel, where we are going to be talking about sustainability and regional development. So I will invite each panelist. Robbie, we can start with you to give about 8 to 10 minutes, a presentation about 8 to 10 minutes on our topic this evening. So Robbie, over to you.
Thank you, Sheriff Bailey. Good afternoon, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure for me to join. And it's kind of strange that I could have joined early as well, but I'm happy to be here to share my little bit of knowledge with everyone here. And I trust that everyone here will also say a prayer for our West Indies cricket team, who is participating in this Cricket World Cup. So the topic today is on development and sustainability in the Caribbean region. And the development in the Caribbean region involves addressing a variety of challenges. There are social challenges, economic challenges, environmental challenges. We must overcome these challenges in order to promote sustainable growth and improve living standard. The sustainability of development strategies in the Caribbean is influenced by a couple of factors, by various factors, and I will just touch on a couple of them this evening. And my first factor I want to discuss is the economic development. The region, the Caribbean region, depends a lot on tourism. a major driver of economic activities, and it's contributed significantly to the GDP and employment of many of our states. However, the resilience of tourism makes economies vulnerable to global economic fluctuations and natural disasters. We can all allude to the recent COVID-19 pandemic and its disruption to tourism and many other of our sectors. Then there is agriculture and fisheries. Traditional sectors has provide livelihoods, but facing various challenges. Challenges such as climate change. Recently I read about overfishing, and something that we have been trying to overcome for many, many years, the trade barriers. Recently, I know there was a tit for tat with Guyana and Trinidad in terms of the exportation of some dairy product, milk, and so forth. So there are many trade barriers that we must overcome. Financial services. Some Caribbean nations are financial hubs. They attract offshore banking and investment. They themselves face regulatory scrutinies, and they need to ensure compliance with international standards. Another factor I would like to touch on is social development. Education and training. Enhancing the quality and accessibility of education is crucial for developing a skilled workforce and reducing unemployment. Healthcare. This is a big topic, and for those who don't know, I work in the healthcare industry. I'm the CEO of the Guyana's national hospital, government-owned, and healthcare is a challenge globally in terms of in human resource aspect. There are less and less people are coming into healthcare, and then there is our workforce from the Caribbean is actually being touted and touted by countries like the UK and the United States of America and Canada, where most of our human resources are going, and obviously that puts us as a risk in healthcare. So improving healthcare system to address non-communicable disease and enhance public health resilience, especially in the face of pandemics and epidemics. Social inclusion, addressing inequalities relating to gender, ethnicity, social, economics, status is essential for cohesive development. We've been seeing many of the inequalities as related to gender and ethnicity, something that the Caribbean country has not really adopted as much like the countries in the West and more developed countries. And those are things that possesses serious challenges for our development and sustainability. There are environmental challenges, like I mentioned earlier, on climate change adaptation. The Caribbean is highly susceptible to hurricanes, sea levels, and other climate-related events. Strategies for building climate resilience are vital. We can see we are having rain recently and unprecedented rain, as a matter of fact, and there have been many flooding in the Caribbean, and we can see even in Dubai and Brazil recently there were massive floodings, and these are the challenges. And we are more vulnerable in the Caribbean than these countries are. So there must be a lot of strategic thinking and planning towards this. For us to overcome many of these challenges, it requires a regional cooperation, a regional integration, something we have been fighting for, we have been advocating for on many occasions. And I suppose that may have been part of the discussions earlier in the various topics over the last 3 days. But regional cooperation is paramount, is vital, is essential. The Caribbean community need to foster a more regional integration and cooperate in trade, health, education, and disaster management. It's very key to ensure that has happened. CDB and other institutions, financial institutions as well, and other regional organizations provides financials and technical support for developing projects. Recently, we saw that there was a meeting with heads of state where the African Exim Bank, I believe, gave a $500 million loan to countries in the Caribbean. No, I think that was $500 million for Guyana, but it was a loan for regional countries. And these are the kind of institutions and organizations we need to tap into to ensure that we develop, we build, develop, and sustain as well. There are many challenges and opportunities as well that faced us. And one of those key, importantly as well, is debt and financial management. There's a high public debt levels in many Caribbean countries. And this necessitates prudent financial management and innovation financing solutions. This was recognized by many, and not only myself or many of, but our regional leaders as well. And I can see clearly there have been many advocacies from our regional leader to different organizations and institutions, and particularly I mentioned the African Exim Bank for assistance in financial management and the various projects as well. Something that we'll face in the Caribbean as well is a digital transformation. It's embracing digital technologies to enhance services, whether in the private sector, in the government, and government offices and entities, education and business. There must be a more emphasis on this, a more alacrity placed on achieving a digital platform and a digital agenda for transformation, because this is where the world is heading to, and this can certainly drive economic growth. Diaspora engagement as well. I have been seeing many of this. Our regional leaders have been engaging in this on a lot. Our president in Guyana, Irfan Ali, and Mayor Motley, I know they have been very much advocacies in these, and I think they themselves have recognized these challenges and opportunity, and they are working towards this agenda. You know, I can say to myself, I always thought that and had these notions that CARICOM was a complete waste of a time. Pardon I say my apologies for that. But I can see of recent years, maybe in the last 3-4 years, I think CARICOM has been trying, and they have been regrouped, and there are more advocacies in throughout all the Caribbean countries, especially in agriculture, in promoting more growth and food and sustainability. I think we have seen, and our leaders have seen and recognized these opportunities and challenges and working towards it. And we should be very proud of it. At least I am. Like I said before, I thought it was a complete waste of time, but I've seen, and we must give kudos where it's deserved, that they have been doing a fantastic job, in my opinion. And in summary, sustainability development in the Caribbean requires a multifaceted approach and balance economic growth, social equity, and environmental protection. Tailored strategy consider the unique characteristics and vulnerability of each nation are essential for achieving long-term prosperity and resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Robbie. Thank you so much. I will now invite David to make a short contribution, about 8 to 10 minutes. David, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Ceronne. Thank you to CCGI for the opportunity to join today and contribute to this very, very, very important panel discussion as part of the entire Governance Week program. I want to thank, Robbie. Robbie hit on probably most of the issues, but I want to at least start my sharing today, taking a little bit of what I would call a helicopter view. The topic is sustainability and regional development. We can't have regional development if regional development is not done in a sustainable way, then we're not doing it. What we're doing is short-term measures that will cause long-term pain. And this is part of the reality of where a lot of countries are. Countries are at different levels along the development continuum. And every country has its rights, has its own, right to develop in the way it sees best. The problem with that is that the planet is decaying around us. The actions that we're taking and the other big countries are taking are going to. Robbie is probably the safest guy here. I will probably run to Guyana when the sea start to take over Trinidad. I'll go and hang out with my good friends down in GT, and I'll go out in Batica and hang out. I'm a frequent visitor, so I know where to go. But I mean, these are real issues. I would share with this group. I was first time in my life genuinely scared about 21 years ago when I listened to a presentation by a guy called Dr. Ulrich Trotz, and he said, this was 21 years ago, and in the presentation, he actually got me scared. He said, listen, people in the Caribbean don't understand what's going to happen with the Caribbean when the sea levels rise. We're going to lose 30 to 40% of our beaches literally overnight in a 5-10 year span. And when that happens, everybody's going to start panicking and wondering what's going on. Now, the exact time frame for when that is going to happen is still, but the issue for me is going to happen. And when you look at the information from the IPCC, it for me gets more and more scary. Forgive me, I'm a student of the data, and I think that these are the issues that I want to talk about. So the core of sustainable development is, of course, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the next generation to meet their own needs. I myself, I have 2 young adults in my house. I have a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old, and I keep talking to them about where we're going, and I hope that they're able to enjoy Trinidad and Tobago and enjoy life in the same way in which, when I was their age, I was able to enjoy everything. And I am genuinely fearful. They may enjoy it, but the generation after them definitely in trouble, at least based on the information I have seen. So we need to understand the drivers and challenges to really what is required for what's meaningful sustainable development. I think the obvious issue is that the last session spoke to the climate emergency. And I am not sure, I don't get the sense of the emergency part of it from when I hear the big guys talk. We all talk about climate change and people, all the powers that we talk about it. But I like the session at Camden, the title, that is a climate emergency. And I'm not sure, I'm not feeling the urgency, because we tend to get caught up in the daily stuff that's right in front of us. But the looming climate emergency presents the greatest threat to our existence in this part of the world. While many of us in this room today may not be physically here to witness the effects, I think the onus is on us to start to lay the groundwork for the survival and growth of our respective nations and places where we operate. I think we have that responsibility to do what we can. We may not all be able to do the same thing. We all have different resources and come from different places, but the onus is on us to see what we can do. We can't throw our hands up in the air and say it's going to happen and we're not going to do anything. I mean, I think that the imperative for simple things like what they call climate resilient infrastructure, and understanding that while, this is a really unfair situation for us in this part of the world, when you look at the data for greenhouse GHG emissions, Trinidad and Tobago in this region is by far the largest GHG emitter. But and we're often touted as being, I hear people keep saying that number, and I hate it, about where Trinidad and Tobago are in the top 3 or the top 5 on a per capita basis. For me, that's a useless number, because on a volume basis, Trinidad and Tobago is 0.8% of the problem. So that if you remove Trinidad and Tobago's complete GHG emissions from the profile, there's still 99.2% of it in the air. So that saying that we're at whatever we are on a per capita basis, it's a number and it's true, but it's not a useful statistic. What is important is that even though we recognize that we're a small place, and even if we stop our emissions completely, it will make absolutely no change to the trajectory of the climate in the Caribbean. We have to continue to demonstrate measures and pursue as best as we can, because I think that we don't really have any other options here. I think that governments and powers that be, whatever you want to call them, the multilateral institutions have a key role in playing in this. And this is where, you know, the discussion always revolves around money. You know, and I have several thoughts on that. The issue of money, I would have people who've heard me speak more than once, so yeah, this is a pet issue that I raise. And I say, listen, we need to just pause and look at the data. I think in the previous session, I was like, Omar said, listen, people need to go and do the research and understand the numbers. Ever since I've been a young man and a young professional and growing up, everyone tells you, you look at the economic data, World Bank, IMF, positive economic growth is good. If your country is having a positive GDP, it means that, you know, you're some of all the commercial economic activity in the country, you're having growth. What has not been really factored in or fully grasped or understood or completely missed, that when you have positive economic growth, there tends to be an increase in energy consumption. And if you have an increase in energy consumption, you tend to have an increase in emissions. So that we've been growing the world economy at the expense of the planet. No, there's ways to treat that. One of the ways to treat that is of course look at the ways in which we use energy in our respective countries to see if we could change the ways and types of energy that we use. One of the other things that's more important for me is that we need to just review this whole way of which we say a country has developed and increased its economic profile. It has to be that being regenerative, having a circular economy, the extent to which you are able to get the best use out of the available resources without damaging the planet, that has to be a factor in what should be considered positive growth for a country, not just purely the GDP number that is churned out. The GDP number is good, it represents it, but without understanding that when you look back at the data and you plot back what happened in COVID time, the planet literally took a breather. When economic development around the world collapsed because of COVID, planes stopped flying, everything slowed down, all the emissions numbers went down. The planet literally breathed a sigh of relief to say, well, finally I'm getting a chance to recover. With the recovery post-COVID, it's going back up. And the correlation is clear. And so for me, it's not, I'm just David Small in Trinidad and Tobago, all the dots down here in the Caribbean. Nobody really knows me in the IMF or World Bank headquarters. But somebody has to figure out a way to say, listen, we need to rebalance this because the international financing and financial institutions are wedded to this whole GDP and GDP growth, you know, process. All the government bonds and all of these other various financing imperatives are linked to that. And to change that requires a level of effort that I don't fully even understand what's required. But if we don't do it, all these other little things that we're doing may not, certainly for us where we are in Trinidad, where we're in Trinidad and Tobago and the other smaller islands, we're in real trouble. Yeah, may not happen in my lifetime, thank God. I have 2 young sons. I hope for the best for them going forward. I hope it doesn't happen in their lifetime, but it's going to happen. And I think that the cost of this is where the issue is. I saw a recent Financial Times report, and the headline of the report is the $9 trillion question. Because according to in the report, the Financial Times said they spoke with the International Renewable Energy Association. And their estimation is that it needs an average of 1,000 gigawatts of renewable power capacity to be built globally every year for us to be able to bring some balance to the system based on the 2015 climate agreement, the 1.5. Yeah, 1,000 gigawatts. I mean, that's just an unreal number of power, and that is the International Renewable Energy Association. And then they add that on top of that, it's not just building the power generation. Buildings will have to be made more energy efficient. Infrastructure will have to be adapted to deal with the effects of climate change, and natural environments restored and made more resilient. All right, so that if the average global temperature is to be limited in line with the 2015 Paris Agreement, then they expect that after 2030, the number will increase to $9 to $10 trillion a year that is required to really bring us back and reel back in what's already been done. When you think about the amount of money spent on renewable energy and all the efforts in the past year, 2022, 2023, the numbers were like 1.3 trillion. If they're saying we need 9 trillion a year, who's going to pay for it? Yeah. And that's to meet the 2015 climate agreement. So this is very sobering information. I know, Kamala, I'm not forgetting you. I have a third on governance that I'm going to speak to about why governance is important in development. But I wanted to go global, to just lay first to understand the landscape and what we're under. Because if we don't do that, we run the risk of running around doing a lot of things without understanding the big picture. And I see that I like what Robbie said, that he's very happy about CARICOM coming, seeming to get some more strength and being more cohesive. I think that's very important. My view is that we need a whole groundswell. We need all the leaders of all the region countries in this part of the world to get together, put aside all of the what I call small issues. Those issues, whatever those are small issues. The climate affecting our lives and livelihoods is the issue. That should be the number one issue. And let's see how we can go to the major organizations. So listen, we don't want to be like Jakarta. I read yesterday, Jakarta, the city of Jakarta in Indonesia, a city of 12 million people, it's 40% underwater. And in the next 20 years, they will have to move a city of 12 million people to another place. You know, fortunately, they have other islands in Indonesia they can move them to. But Trinidad and Tobago, where do we move to? I will gladly go beg a lodge in my colleagues in Vatican and other places I have. But I mean, everybody doesn't have the opportunity to move. Some of us may migrate, but that's what we're facing. And we need to firmly understand that that is part of the scenario that we're facing. So let me start to just wrap up my introductory comments. I have quite a few things I want to say. The short term, I want to say 2 points. The short term approach. We have a wonderful system where we tend to always, in our parts of the world, things happen on a political cycle, and it's at some point in time the heads have to get together and figure out how to not do that. The high level panel on global sustainability put it in these words, and I quote: "There are few incentives to put sustainable development into practice when our policies and our politics and institutions disproportionately reward short-term incentives." Yeah. So this is where I like when big organizations looking at the whole picture, capitalize it in a way that we could easily understand that the focus on the short term is difficult to talk about sustainable development when your focus is the next election. Everything you're thinking about is, well, yeah, whatever you're doing is not sustainable. You're doing stuff, but it's not really in the name of sustainable development. You're just doing stuff. And I'm not saying anybody is bad or people are wrong to do what they're doing. What I'm saying is that I would like that the people who are up there and others like them get together and say, guys, we need to get together and let's figure out a plan for the long term that will survive us and survive our generation. That's what I'm saying. And people like us on this call here would gladly contribute whatever expertise or knowledge we have to share on that, because we believe that is very important. Yeah. One last issue I'm going to talk about in my introduction. I've run over time, Ceronne, forgive me. But there's a big issue for us to move forward, and it's called trust. Yeah. Trust is a real big issue for us to really move this whole process forward. I read a recent World Bank study that says that trust has been increasingly recognized as fundamental for development. Their research has shown that a positive correlation exists between institutional trust and a range of developmental indicators, including economic growth, social cohesion, and well-being, as well as the ability of a political system to sustain policy reforms. So that the World Bank did a series of work in, I think it's Malaysia. I can always send it if anybody wants, but what they have said is that they recognize that how important trust is to governance. It's not no longer just people being in offices governing. People have to trust the people and the systems, otherwise you won't get the buy-in. Yeah, and if you don't get it buy-in, then you know this whole thing that we're doing, they're just running around a circle here, doing lots of stuff, but not achieving anything, or not taking us anywhere. And so forgive me, I'm gonna stop there. I have a lot of information, but these are just some of my deep thoughts on what I'm very passionate about this subject matter, about development and making sure it's done in a sustainable way. And I will try my best to contribute to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Some very, very true points. I mean, we could talk for days. Afra, your thoughts, any thoughts to share, 8 to 10 minutes on what we're speaking about today?
Let me start off by saying that I've already been reflecting about all of this, even before Kamala asked me to be part of this program. I'm going to try to stick to 10 minutes, so I'm going to race through some things fairly quickly. And if you want to, we can unpack them later in the discussion, okay? Start off by saying that the progress we've had in the Caribbean since independence, I think the progress is terrific. I'm going to put myself on that side of the line, on that side of the debate. I'm not one of those who believes that we should have remained colonized, or the British should have remained in power, or we should get Canada or the United States to take us over. I think that's nonsense. Our people, we have done well. We need to be critical. We need to focus and discuss how we could do better. What were the things we did very, very well, and what were the things we did very, very poorly? And I want to talk a little bit, David, you made a very tantalizing point towards the end of your remarks when you spoke about the question of truth and trust and the importance of that in this transformative journey of ours, yes? And we live in a post-truth era where, in fact, as we've seen in the last 4 years with the COVID, such and such, and Robbie, you would be very painfully aware of that in your position as head of the public hospital in Georgetown. We've seen a lot of nonsense about anti-vax this and Obama the other, and the United Nations something, and there was a chip in the vaccine and a whole lot of stuff. And it's really striking. We need to pause for a cause and take our bearings. What I found striking about it for me, and I'll speak in colloquial terms from time to time, what I found striking for me was the fact that almost everybody who approached me to discuss these anti-vax points, these post-truth points, not a single one of them was educated in science or medicine. They were in all kinds of other fields. Even when we were in school together, they didn't even have subjects in biology or chemistry. It's true. Think about it. Who was talking to you about it? Okay? They had strong opinions. They would argue with you. They would send you 50 videos on WhatsApp. And in fact, we were being tested to destruction. Our mental flexibility as a community was being tested to destruction on a global scale during that pandemic by people who have made an art out of misinformation. So we need to understand that information has been weaponized so that, in fact, a basic piece of information from a public authority that is trusted and well managed could, in fact, come under attack, which speaks to somebody like Robbie, because of some random video you saw on WhatsApp or on YouTube. So we need to understand that is the moment we are at, a moment of peculiar challenge. And then we need to go a little further and go into something I've been ruminating over for the last 6 months or so, that in fact, our Caribbean has a rich tradition. If you go back 60, 65 years, because I tend to read in the past. That is the kind of boring stuff I do as a nerd. So I would read the New World. And I would read the Kai Kovaral. Robbie, you know about that, right? Yes? And I would read all of these journals and these arguments in the Caribbean Quarterly. And I would see that back then, there's a particular issue of the New World Quarterly for Guyana's independence in 1966. It's quite peculiar because the president at the time, the prime minister at the time, Forbes Burnham, actually wrote a long letter to thank them for writing this series of articles, critical articles, about the future of Guyana, what was Guyana's prospects, and so on. They were debating it. Questions of race, questions of the land, questions of agriculture, questions of industry, taxation, education, all of the important questions to build a nation. And the most peculiar thing about that judgment, there are two peculiar things about it. Number one was striking, really. Number one was the capacity and the appetite to debate the issues of the day in non-personal terms, which is all too lacking now. It is all too lacking now. You cannot have a debate. I've been trying to have a debate for 25 years. Nobody wants to debate anything. So he just gets stupid in his feet at P&M. He vexed because his firm didn't get the work. Well, he was ready with that girl. And some foolishness. You can't get anybody to have a serious discussion about the issues of the day. And I am talking about, because I've engaged them up to and including the ministers in cabinet and the people sitting on the bench and so on, and the senators and so on. It's impossible to get them to engage in a debate on the issues of the day. Nothing personal. Second point that was very striking and where we have to turn our eyes if we want to have a hope for the future for our civilization, our Caribbean civilization, is the fact that the people making those debates in 62 and 59 and 65 and 66 with the Caribbean Quarterly for Guyana's independence, the people making those debates were young people. All of them were under 35. Nobody on this panel, those of us here on the head table, don't feel bad. I'm 63. Don't feel bad. None of us on the head panel, we would have been old to those people. So the young people at that time, the Lloyd Best and the Norman Gervin, okay, and the Clive Thomas, and the Beckford, and Pat Bishop, and Carrie Levitt, and know those names. Those of you who don't know the names, write it down. Go and look up what they wrote. We're engaging in strong debates on the issue of the day. What do we do in this region? How do we take this region forward? It was very refreshing. It is very inspiring to go back and read those things. The other point I want to make, because one of my big areas of work has been the procurement issue, the public procurement issue, and of course, the issue of transparency. It is not possible to have these sorts of discussions, these important, unavoidable discussions, without proper information. So those of you who are gatekeepers, and I could see some of you in the audience here, I see Ms. Arlene McComey, who was very, very helpful to us at one stage in our efforts. And I see some others out here. I can't see any other names right now, but certainly Ms. McComey, Ian Forbes, and so on. These people were very helpful to us in our efforts to get information. Those of you who are gatekeepers who are in this session, or you have friends who are gatekeepers, you have to set the captives free. We have to get the information out there to be able to have the debate, to be able to have the discussion, to be able to make the correct decision. We're arguing for a fact-based decision-making process. Correct, David? Fact-based. And at that point, we could disagree on the meaning of the facts. We could disagree whether this fact means this or it means that. We could debate that. But without facts, we are left in a stupid place, dotishness, with rumor and speculation and people talking about race and sexuality, and who from Tobago, and who from South, and who's an Indian, and a whole lot of foolishness that has nothing to do with what's going on. Because believe me, when those people get together to discuss their thing, they don't discuss anything stupid like that. That stupidness is for the plebs. And we have to elevate this discussion to the point. And the first stage in that is to get the information free. And we have to have a commitment to debate the information with each other in non-personal terms. Coming to the procurement aspect of it, you can see I have 4 minutes to go. Coming to the procurement aspect of it, I want to say that the key point here is that we need to recognize, in terms of public procurement, that public money is a different species from private money. Completely different species from private money. And the learning from that comes from Lord Sharman's report of 2001 called Holding to Account, from the House of Lords in the United Kingdom. Those of you who don't know it, make a note. House of Lords, Holding to Account, Lord Sharman. And the point Sharman and his committee made, and the English have a very, and I'm not an Anglophile, but I would say what I have to say when I have to say positive things. I would make those points. The English have a very clear and refreshing way to express themselves in official reports, compared to our contorted thing where everybody trying to sound more educated than everybody else. Sharman made it very clear. Public money is a different type of money from private money because it is raised by coercion, which we call taxation. It is raised for a stated purpose to serve the public interest, yes? And it is normally dedicated in budgeted amounts to different state agencies. Therefore, those agencies and those institutions have a higher stage of duty to explain to the public what they're doing with that money and how they're transacting it. In conclusion, in summary, Ceronne said, public money is to be treated and accounted for to a higher standard than private money. David, I believe I've made very helpful note of your comments when you were chairman of the Joint Select Committee of Parliamentary Committee on State Enterprises, looking at the hotels in Trinidad and Tobago. David made a number of incisive observations on that point regarding Hilton Trinidad. Massive amounts of money spent to refurbish the hotel, and nobody could say why or what was the rationale for the project and so on. You remember that, of course, yeah? I made very careful note of those things. So the work has been done. Colleagues, comrades and colleagues have started the work. Today is Labor Day. I use the word comrades intentionally. We started the work, okay? And we need to continue the work. We dedicate ourselves to this work. And coming further along on the procurement discussion in my final 2 minutes is the question of project selection. If we have disciplined ourselves to treat public money to a higher standard than private money, and we won't spend public money on something that's not feasible, it raises important questions about the project selection. We can't just pick projects because they're politically popular or they are projects pride that a political leader may want this project or that project. We are picking projects because they make sense. We are picking projects because they contribute to the common good. And we have to revitalize concepts of national planning. That is underway in Trinidad and Tobago. We need to go faster on that, okay? Because what is a threat, and I'm closing off on this now, what is a threat in terms of two essential issues that are talking points nowadays? What is a threat is the whole issue, number one, of decentralization. People want to decentralize in Trinidad and Tobago because of the traffic. They want an office close to home and so on. Working from home has muted a lot of that discussion. But decentralization is a false goal. We built so many things in the capital city already for the wrong reasons. We need to use those buildings. We need to use them and use them well. And we need to move to some sort of public transportation system. Not necessarily a train. That train idea was crazy. But perhaps some kind of rapid bus transit or something. We need to move to that. And the other point is really about how we go forward in terms of our education for our young people. The notion that raising a challenge is not a bad thing. How do you raise a challenge? How do you debate a point? How do you settle a point? How do you go forward? Those are important values for us going forward. And Madam Chairman Ceronne Bayley, on the 10th minute, I would stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Afra. We off to a passionate start. We had Robbie identifying some challenges. And it seemed to me that the challenges he's identified, they mirror many of the challenges that we face here in Trinidad and Tobago. You know, David spoke to the issue of trust. Very, very vital point. And Afra spoke to basically how does the government, they don't even want to debate you. You know, I like the fact that you present a balanced view in that we have done well. We have done well. When I was in the public sector, I worked for a bus company and we changed the entire fleet to CNG, converted the entire fleet to CNG. So we have CNG available at gas stations. So we're doing things, but is it quick enough given the urgency? You know, David spoke about the urgency. Is it all the little things that we're doing, the little short-term wins that we could acknowledge, is it enough given the urgency of what we're facing here in the Caribbean as a region, right? And David, perhaps you could contribute. Who's responsible for creating a sense of urgency?
Yes, got my mic okay. Thank you very much, Ceronne. And I want to thank my brother Afra for his very, very impassioned contribution. I think that, you know, there's people like that we need in this discussion. Now, who needs to create the agency, Ceronne? The issue for us is that the current sets of planners do not seem to have the time window planning frame in mind when they're planning things. And this is the fundamental weakness in the way in which we're doing things. You have to forgive me, everyone will forgive me. I'm an analyst by training. So when I like structure, when I see things happening without structure, it tends to mean that you're not really doing anything. You're doing stuff. You're doing lots of things, But without structure, you end up with a whole set of things, but they don't connect, or they don't deliver the results that we really need to have. So in order for us to get the right frame for this, it requires people to, one, acknowledge, the first stage in fixing a problem is acknowledging that there's a problem. Yeah. We have, so that we need to get the powers that be. I would like to hear all the Caribbean leaders stand and say, listen, there is a problem. It is the climate change effects. We expect that these things are going to happen, probably not in our lifetimes, but it will certainly affect the next generation. And we realize it's the number one activity for us to do as a nation. We may have individual things that we do differently, but we're resolute. I could write it for them. I could write the communique for them, because that is what we need. Without that, what you have is everyone trying, and I think Derek put in the comments, I enjoyed Derek's point is in the comments is that, there's a price for doing something, but there's also a price for not doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is the issue. And so that if we don't do it, we're in real trouble. If we do it, we may still be in trouble, but at least we may have some mitigation measures put in place to help us manage lives and livelihoods. Because when we think about the effects of climate change, it's not just the Caribbean is a region where the majority, certainly most of the small islands, their economic lives are centered around the beaches and the fisheries, and if that is severely damaged, the livelihood issue for those countries becomes desperate. Not to mention any loss of life from the actual event itself. The extent to which that has sunk in on the leaders of those organizations, to the point where I'm not saying that they don't know, but I am not hearing them expressing it on a consistent basis, and not certainly and loudly, that climate change effects will decimate your economy. If your beaches are lost to the sea, who's going to fly from the US or England or wherever to come to sit and look at the lagoon? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop there. I have too much information. I'm going to allow Robbie or Afra to chime in.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. The pros and cons. There's a cost to do something. There's also a cost not to do it. Even at the micro level, companies are recognizing the need for ESG, the need for sustainability. But is it even at that level still a checkbox type of thing? Like, is it something that's truly acknowledged as needed, or is it something you're just doing, okay, we've checked this box, we've done the sustainability portion, we have something to put in our annual report, but the real agenda really is to generating the profit. So, but is it something that is genuine? Robbie, what do you think? What do you see happening in Guyana at the micro level and even at the public sector level? Is it just a checkbox, or is it something that people genuinely acknowledge?
I think it can happen both ways. There are people who does these things, like we would want to say, for the attention, the likes, the fame that comes with it, or the benefits that will come with their organizations. But many of them is if you ask them really and truly to implement these strategies, they wouldn't. In Guyana, I mean, Guyana is changing now. Now people are becoming more and more cognizant of these requirements and regulations and best practices. But there were days that people don't want to invest in these different frameworks in ESG and the environmental and social impact assessments and these different things. Even in government sector, you would see that projects. Afra spoke a lot about procurement, and he and I share that in common, because I spend a lot of my life in procurement as well. And there are many times that there are projects that you just, and where the multilateral agencies require, there are certain framework. Sometimes it's just a checkbox. But I think that it's evolving a bit, where there is a demand to ensure that these things are in place and also that they are executed. Because I can recall while I was working with the World Bank a couple of years ago, when there was the client and then there was a consultant and a contractor, then there was a supervisory forum who was not the consultant. So there was technically a consultant who was really looking at the supervisory forum and the contractor to ensure that there was this conformance and compliances. So there are different agencies that are putting steps in place to ensure that it is just not a checkbox anymore.
Yeah.
And if I take this opportunity, I've listened to Afra a lot, and I always enjoy his presentations. And he was speaking on many issues, and one of them that crossed my mind while he was speaking is social media. I see social media as a threat to our region. We have a large population that is vulnerable. And like he was speaking about the anti-vaxxer and the chip in the vaccine and these different foolishness. The fact that we were gullible enough to believe that, and he was saying that there were people who were not, have no science background whatsoever in any form or fashion, but they were the big advocacies on these things. And there was an article in New York Times just recently I saw Al Jazeera carry it a couple of days ago as well. And the United States Surgeon General calls for a warning label on social media platform similar to those that are on cigarette packages because of the serious mental health implications and impact that it have. Our Caribbean people spend a lot of time on social media. They are very gullible to the things that are presented there as well. We have a tendency of not the facts checking, and we love the shares. We all for the likes, and it's gonna get worse. But I see this as a threat to regional development as well.
Yeah, I want to agree with that wholeheartedly. But that is, it's part of our culture. It's ingrained in us, not just in Trinidad, possibly throughout the Caribbean, possibly even larger than that. So is that something that we could really avoid? You know, social media does have its many advantages, and Afra, I'm claiming my youth on this. I'm claiming my youth here. You know, social media has a lot of advantages, but there will be people who are just throwing things out there without any evidence whatsoever. That might be something we could never really avoid. So it's important to get
No, while I must say this, sorry to interrupt, while we can't avoid it, in order for there to be a sense of sustainability, and because violence is becoming a public health crisis, gun violence and various forms of violence, social media contributes to that. And if the powers to be policies makers, you know, in the article, it mentioned that there was comments, and he was making this at the Congress, to the Congress, and people like Facebook, the owners, and TikTok, and these different places, they did not respond to the questions and comments, and so it is people being held responsible, and those in the powers to be in the policy level will have to ensure that this becomes a topic, just like how now violence is a public health crisis in the Caribbean. Social media will become crisis as well.
And there are ways to report it. Sorry, Robbie. There are ways, if you see anything put on social media, any sort of report or post, I know there's some sites, YouTube, they allow you to make reports. So even us, we could make reports so that, you know, these things, nefarious activities that social media will not be used to encourage these sorts of things. But we have we have a lot of engagement here in the chat that I want to address.
Ceronne, before you go to the chat, I've put a few documents in the chat. The last document I've put is the World Economic Forum report on global risks. And this falls squarely with the point Robbie is making. The number one risk, according to the World Economic Forum that face the world, whether it's private company or government, is misinformation. Okay? Yeah. So Robbie has hit it right there. And when you have the World Economic Forum doing their annual survey and putting out their 2024 report, I put it in the chat so people can access it. This is what it is. This is one of the biggest risks that we face in doing anything, whether it's a private company or it's a government organization or whatever. The issue of misinformation using the wonderful technology that everybody has now is a real issue, and the fixes are not all easy. You can always report accounts and report things, but many times certainly TikTok and some of those others, they don't even bother to, they just leave them. So your people's reputations get tarnished, your businesses, people say things about you that are completely untrue, and they get away. And they get away with it, and the damage is done. I'm not even sure. I don't know how to fix that, but I think I just wanted to share that information because the report covers a range of course, the number 2 risk is climate change. That is not surprising. So I'm not going to talk anymore about that. But the document is in the chat.
Yes, I'm saying WEF report on global risk.
Yeah.
So let's get engaged. Oswald. What Oswald is saying here is that he acknowledges that digital transformation is the way to go, but we have to be cognizant of the security that has to go with digital transformation. And so we also have that issue in sustainability as well. How are we evolving as a region when it comes to digital transformation, to cybersecurity? How is that happening? How is it, what is taking place in each Caribbean country when it comes to that? There are many, many risks. We just had data breaches in some of our companies here. Is that also happening in other Caribbean countries?
Ceronne, if I may just interject as well and take the conversation in a slightly different direction too, because I do understand the cybersecurity risk, and I was sharing in the chat that we had Novak Gowanda, and we have also had Ian John deal with these issues in previous panels during Governance Week here. But this particular panel has a measure of expertise to talk about some solutions that people have been raising in previous panels as well, and that is the fact that the region needs to come together to pool resources. And one of the challenges has been that lack of support and integration. I was very happy to hear Robbie talk about CARICOM beginning to perform better. But is that good enough? And I want to be provocative and ask Afra to come in first with that, because he and I have had this conversation, because he has seen it firsthand where you have some of the countries attempting to do things, but you're not getting the support from the rest of the countries in the region. And really and truly, for how small the region is, we do need to bring all of these different parties together. How can we get this kind of movement going? Afra, what do you see as the challenges, and do you have a potential solution to offer?
So the CARICOM question, I believe, will unfold as a matter of necessity when we need to hang together. So there were some fairly desperate meetings and protestations recently, about 3 weeks ago in Port of Spain, on the question of cricket, the regional cricket team, and so on. But I don't have much more to say on that. I would step back to deal with Robbie's point and with David's point, and I open my remarks talking about the danger of false information age, and the fake information. And David, I want to link the two things. So you were referring to the World Economic Forum's report on global risks, which you posted in the chat. And you made the important point that the first issue they identified was the question of misinformation. And I want to say, and then you went on to say the second issue is the environment. And I want to say that the two things are very much, although they may be separated because of the conventions of writing a report, the two things are very much intermingled. Because if you delve into the environmental threads or the discussions where the big issues are debated, you'll find there's a lot of people who are in there arguing hell hard that there really isn't any climate change. Nothing's changing, nothing's wrong. You guys are falling for Biden's nonsense and so on. You must go on about this. It's terrifying. So you can have countries in the Pacific disappearing and all kinds of terrible consequences playing out for us. And we don't have the capacity to deal with those things unless we deal with the false information. So the two things are very much intermingled. Coming back to your point, Kamala, about the regional perspective and how we can work together, one of the things I always thought about is that the biggest country, quotation marks, in the region, the way we conventionally describe the region, is Guyana. And I was in Guyana, I think it was in October, and the president was installing the Public Service Commission. And after there hadn't been a commission for a while, after he installed them, he spoke for about an hour about a number of things he wanted to do. Important projects the government is doing. They were going to do this and they were going to do that. Very important things, because a lot of progress is taking place in Guyana. I was in the car coming from the airport and we were in a spot of traffic, so I was able to listen to the whole hour on my way to Pegasus. And it struck me, and I said it to a number of friends in Guyana, it struck me that although the government is now able to do things they weren't able to do before, and it's now it remains the largest country in the region, there's a particular threat to Guyana that I haven't heard any steps to deal with. And I think as a region, even if we put up money and create a bond, that seawall needs to raise. We're talking about rising sea level. That seawall needs to raise by about 10 to 12 feet. If it is, you have to get contractors who know how to do those massive kind of projects. Some Chinese, get them to do it. But we can't afford to lose the first 50 miles of Guyana. We can't afford to, because that is really what is at stake. The whole country will be wiped out, because that is where most of their, in conventional terms, that's where most of their development is taking place. It is the new frontier of the region. And as far as I am aware, I'm subject to correction, because I do follow things in Guyana very closely. I'm subject to correction. But as far as I'm aware, there are no proposals to raise the seawall. And the seawall, as Robbie, you know, the seawall has problems here, it has problems there, and they will have little leaks and problems along the way. It needs work. So if there's one thing in the region you ask me to do, which is coming back to your point, Kamala, regionally, one thing we can focus on and say, let's do this. Let's do it. We have room in Guyana, we make citizenship for this one and for that one. Let's make a Caribbean citizenship, and let us chip up and make a bond and raise that wall. That's it for now.
I want to try to link information and misinformation to regional development. And Afra, I usually depend on you in our chats to give me a lot of history, right? Now, when I was growing up, I always heard my father and my family talk about the Federation. The Federation, and what happened there, and it didn't work. But that's something I heard about a lot growing up. Now, the information that they would have had back then would be much less than the information that is available to us now. So their thoughts on what happened with the Federation and the interaction between the different countries when I was growing up would be based on what they believed, given the information they had at that time. You know, but now we have so much more information at our hands. And because we have so much more information, we also have much more misinformation. But what really forms our opinion on regional development, even at CARICOM, what really is informing that? With all the information that is out there, are we really together as a region? I mean, CCGI is trying. We have board members, some different regions. So you're seeing little elements of regional collaboration, the cricket, the West Indies cricket. So we're seeing it, but can we be stronger together as a region?
Novak has just responded in the chat, so if we could invite him to share, because the interesting thing, what he has shared, is that when you talk about regional collaboration, maybe one of the good places we could get case studies is through the University of the West Indies, and that is where he's at. So if you want to invite him to unmute and share.
Yes, Novak, feel free.
Thanks, Kamala. Thanks, Ceronne. So obviously, I can't speak on behalf of the university here. I'm speaking as a researcher who looked at the data before me. And I think one of the challenges that we face as a region, especially when it comes to regional collaboration, is funding. Because what happens is that funding would always be disproportionate because we have different economies, different scale of the economies. And what happens is that some countries naturally put more effort in, they naturally pull more weight. But when the status quo changes, and that was a theme a couple of days ago, when the status quo changes and a particular country isn't able to give that level of contribution anymore, the whole dynamic changes, and I think the end result suffers a bit. So I think regional collaboration has, obviously, I am all for it, but I think funding is always a huge issue, and we need to figure out innovative ways of funding regional collaboration.
Yes.
Be interested to hear David's thought on that.
Kamala, I was trying to stay out of this one because I have some history from the days when I used to attend CARICOM government meetings and sit in it. There's always been tension. I'm gonna use